Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jim Birchfield. I'm a member of the Montana Forest Collaboration Network's Advisory Council, and I'm very pleased and honored to be able to help MC the program today. We've got two very interesting panels coming up that are the heart of our session, and I'm very pleased that we're going to be able to talk about some of the challenges that collaboratives face, and particularly in the legal arena, after our break this morning. And before we get started, I want to kind of thank the folks from yesterday who came and made presentations. Patrick Holmes from the Governor's Office, Dave Haddis, who talked about the Copper King fire from the Plains-Thompson Falls Ranger District, Al Christofferson from the Elkhorns Group, and then Paul McKenzie and Amy Robinson, who talked about the Whitefish Range Partnership. How about one more round of applause for those wonderful presentations? We also had an opportunity through the evening to have an election. Today is election day, and many of us decided to vote early and often. Although the voting wasn't that often. This was not a terrible power struggle. Our advisory council was affirmed by the membership, and so what I'd like to do is to say congratulations to the members of the advisory council for the Montana Forest Collaboration Network. I'm going to read off their names and remind them that we have a meeting a week from today at 10:30. So the lucky you, here we go. So our new members of the Advisory Council, Julia Altimus, Joe Asher, Matt Arno, Scott Brennan, Jim Birchfield, Gary Burnett, Al Christofferson, Marnie Criley, Tony Coulter, Russ Ennis, Aaron Ferris Olson, John Gatchell, Steve Hedstrom, Blake Henning, Brian Kahn, Robin King, Jake Krylik, Pat McKelvey, Mark Peck, John Prinky, and Gordy Sanders. So that's the leadership of our group. Congratulations to everyone. We want to make the leadership of this group as open as possible. So you have a chance next year to submit your name, and I've got a suspicion that you might get elected. So if you wish to participate in this group, we meet probably somewhere between 8 and 10 times a year, typically on a monthly basis, the second Tuesday of the month. Many people call in on a conference call, so it's not a terribly burdensome kind of responsibility, although we have a lot of big issues facing us. And I am really happy as a member of the Advisory Council to feel like our group is making a difference. So if you would like to be able to participate in Advisory Council meetings, they are open to any participants, but our voting membership I just announced. And you will have a chance next year if you wish to be a part, and you can communicate to those in your collaborative groups that they are welcome to be part of this leadership group. All right, one other piece of business that I want to bring up is the vote that we took on two things. One, a protocol for the network to be able to make endorsements. And now, as you know, almost any group is often asked by petitioners, whether it's a citizen or another organization, to endorse their particular position or their idea or their initiative. And we thought a lot in the Advisory Council about, well, how will we respond to people who want these endorsements? And so yesterday, Tim Love, read you this protocol for how the network would respond to those requests for support, with a process to allow the advisory committee to actually review it and to see if it affects collaboration, to share it with the advisory council, and then the advisory council could dispose of it either by saying this doesn't really meet our criteria to affect collaboration in the forest and grassland environments, and we're sorry that we can't proceed with this. The advisory council could say, yes, we support this, it's very obvious, and support whatever action necessary, perhaps a letter to public officials. And then finally to take no position and to allow the collaborative groups themselves, if they wish to respond to this issue, to do so, and to provide to each of the collaborative groups information on this request so they could make an informed decision. And in the balloting for that proposal, there were 23 yeses and 1 no. And there were 2 comments that were brought up that I wish to bring up. So with that kind of 23 to 1, obviously this protocol passes by the affirmation of the participants here in this meeting as following our process outlined in the charter. But I want to respect and have a moment to talk a little bit about the process itself to acknowledge this concern. And the concern was, for any endorsement, should the individual collaboratives have the option to either sign on or not sign on to that endorsement? In other words, should the advisory committee almost always default to that option C to allow the individual collaboratives to make that decision to do so or not? And I want to open that up as an open question for a few moments, because we have a few moments before our first panel, to make sure we're acknowledging that interest and that we don't, as a network, seem to overstep our bounds. Now, as you'll observe, we have never endorsed anything, and the one question that has come up was the question of fire funding, which all of us voted on yesterday. And I can tell you right now, before we get into that, that was unanimously supported, that we as a network say something to the effect of writing a letter to our Montana congressional delegation, encouraging them to work together to find better ways of funding the cost of firefighting over the present process. So we really believe in that, and that's one thing based on that vote that we will do. But in the future, if we get requests for support, I believe the Advisory Council is going to be very cautious in submitting an affirmation that yes, we will support this, without going back to the collaborative groups to see if those groups wish to support it. In other words, I'm suggesting, and this is something that the Advisory Council is going to discuss next week, what kind of threshold should we have to make an endorsement ourselves as an Advisory Council versus sending it back to all the collaboratives. Could you give me some counsel on that? Is there someone who has thought about that threshold? Should we typically send it back to all the collaboratives for their support as this one member identified? Or are there instances where it seems, when we decide by consensus in the Advisory Council, if we have consensus on the Advisory Council to be able to make some kind of statement based on a request, are there conditions under which we can do that? Yes, Brian.
I would offer this just for thinking about. It seems to me that unless there is a time crunch, and sometimes there is a time crunch, say there's not a time crunch, what's the problem with saying, and there's consensus on the Advisory Council, what is the problem with sending out an email to the chair of each of the collaboratives and saying, look, here's the deal, we've got this much time, we have consensus, if you let us know if it comes up, comes sideways, or you just don't have time to get an answer, and we'll take that as it comes sideways.
Okay.
What's the problem with that? Because the plus side seems to me to be when you communicate, it's one thing if I'm a politician or whoever, to get something from the Montana Collaborative, Forest Collaborative Network. It's another one to say from the MFCN representing 20 organizations who all agree.
Mm-hmm. I see.
That's a stronger statement, it seems to me. So I don't understand the risk in checking. I just throw that out there for consideration.
Excellent suggestion. Is there someone who would like to add to that?
So we actually talked about this over dinner, and as a chair, you know, if you're going to list the collaborative, then I would like to, what Brian had said, is to make sure that as a chair we understand what it is and you're representing us. If you guys forward something like that to the chair and say, upon the recommendation of the Executive Council Board, whatever you guys call steering committee, we recommend a further recommendation that we're due pass on this, bring it forward. But we'd also like to see a comment statement saying, this is why we recommend this.
Uh-huh.
You know, kind of like.
The rationale.
Ballot initiative, well, you get a pro and a con type of argument in that newspaper before the initiatives come out. Something like that. And I understand the time crunch. If you could just put in a paragraph saying this is what it is, this is what it's about, this is why we want it to pass, and this is why we want your endorsement. That would be great in case someone comes to us as a chair and say, hey, what the hell are you thinking? This is what it is, and this is what I was thinking. And so I think a little bit more due diligence and homework and pass on to us would be great.
Good, good, thank you. Yes, sir.
Are you talking about a blackball situation, or are you talking about majority of the collaborative agree, or?
No, we're not talking about that at all. What we're talking about is someone will submit to, the chair, which happens to be Gordy. We would like you to support, increased salvage sales across the state. And the members of the advisory council go, we see the value of that as long as they're designed, et cetera. And, we might thumbs up, one thumb sideways and say, okay, we have, agreement on the advisory council that this is something we could support. Then, how do we respond in terms of either sending a letter or doing some action? And what we've gotten is suggestions from, both this comment on the vote and then from Brian and the other comment, is that we need to actually be careful and go back to the collaboratives and have them sign on, giving them information about the details of the request, the potential implications, before any letter goes forward. Am I characterizing that fairly? I kind of like this idea, by the way, but it's up to the advisory council, and Gordy, I think this is going to be something we need to address right away. Any other comments on this? Chris?
Well, Jim, I'm just wondering, in a circumstance where you don't have time, you point that out. Do the collaboratives agree that it's okay for you to act unilaterally, in essence, on something that is very time sensitive? It's something that came up, it's in the news. It's not that something's gonna happen quickly. We need to address it quickly. Are the collaboratives okay with you making the decision that we can't send this out this time because of time?
It's an important question. Yes.
It seems to me like there are possibly two statements you could make. One is a statement on behalf of the organization, which you guys would be, and the other would be a statement recognizing the full concurrence or support of each of the collaboratives. And I don't know, I personally would feel more comfortable with that sort of a distinction if there's a time problem. But
we could acknowledge that we're not speaking for the collaboratives,
right,
but only for the organization,
right,
if and only if there's this kind of time
right,
crunch.
exactly.
What if? I think that's reasonable. What do others think so too?
I think, trying to think of the kinds of requests that might come to the advisory council, but with the breadth of collaboratives across the state that are, some of them have little different focuses than others and things, and so I think it's going to be up to the advisory council to have to sift through what these requests really entail. Do they entail a real broad, general statement of support, or is it more specific? Because I think the more specific you get, the more apt you're going to run into issues, and you may have to revert to asking each collaborator if they're willing to support this kind of statement.
I would agree. I think, we get hit with a number of different requests. For example, if there's a piece of legislation, somebody wants us to endorse something that either Congress is doing or the legislature is doing, those kinds of questions where it is time sensitive, but our stance is probably on those kinds of issues that we're going to pass information on to the collaboratives or individual collaboratives to determine, which track they would like to go down, rather than us trying to speak for
Right,
all the collaboratives.
right.
So it is going to be, as Al said, case by case. We will filter through what comes in. And I know there's a number of requests that have come in that aren't really even relevant, so and nobody really needs to be
Right.
brought up to speak on.
And I think the first kind of steps in the protocol for the advisory council to be the filter for those things would hopefully help the rest of the collaboratives. You don't have to deal with that stuff. But some key issues, I think it's important to go back, as Brian suggested and others, to allow the collaboratives to independently sign on to give that letter of support even more force. All right, I really appreciate this discussion. Yeah, Ed.
Just hope the advisory committee doesn't get bogged down with too many details on this whole bit, because if you've got an advisory committee already, you know, for the most part, I would think that would be representative government. They ought to be able to make these kind of decisions unless it's something really questionable that you have to go back and prove.
Well, my anticipation, Ed, is that the advisory council is going to be very cautious about making an assertion for the network. Going back to the group, I think, is almost the default position on an issue of significance. But there's some issues that are either timing issues or not as important, where we can hopefully relieve the burden on the collaboratives for trying to, weed through some things. I mean, something like an honor. Would you be willing to honor someone? I think perhaps that's something that, might come up that has a time sensitive that we could, yes, the network honors Gordy Sanders. Oh, that's a stretch, but. Okay, I don't want to belabor this point, but I really appreciate that feedback, and we'll let you know in terms of the, discussion the advisory council has next week on modifying how this is going to go forward. But to move on and to reaffirm, we did just vote on making a statement about fire funding. And you'll note that our statement is not endorsing any particular approach to how this is going to be done, or how this is going to be done, or how it's going to be tied to any other legislative issues. It's simply fix the fire funding problem, which is a pretty, I think, straightforward request. Any other comments on that, on the fire funding endorsement? All right, great. Well, let's move on to our panels, which are going to be far more interesting. And one more time, congratulations to the new advisory committee members. Thank you, everyone, for all your effort in coming to these understandings about how we can govern ourselves. I think we have a long future. Remember, we're only, this is only the end of our first year, so we have a lot going on ahead of us. And as we continue to work, and as Tim Love mentioned yesterday, we're going to be working even in regional partnerships with the Idaho forest groups and even the Northwest forest groups in the future. And I think our presence is going to be really significant for that. All right, so if I can ask our first speaker to be prepared, I'm pleased to be able to introduce Christine Daw, who serves as the Director of Renewable Resource Management for the Region 1 of the Forest Service. Christine has previously served in a variety of positions in the Forest Service in the Southwest before becoming Deputy Forest Supervisor of the Idaho Panhandle National Forest. Her background in environmental planning has served her well, and I most remember Christine as someone who came to the advisory committee meetings of the College of Forestry and Conservation when I was working there, and she was an outstanding contributor, and I'm sure she does that throughout all of her work. So please join me in welcoming Christine Daw to the podium.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. First off, I think your agenda probably says Leanne Martin as the speaker, who's our regional forester, and she really wanted to be here, but unfortunately she's taking part in a Western Fire Leadership meeting with several other regional foresters and other folks. So asked me, MFCM was gracious enough to let me stand in and talk a little bit about why I think collaboration is important. And am I correct, we're going to have a Q&A? So are you going to give me the, shut up, Christine sign? Okay. So I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to interact or meet our current chief, Chief Took. or whether it was around his work on development of the 2012 planning rule, or I think a few of you have probably had the opportunity to engage with him in his current role. If you have, or if you've seen any of the pieces that have come out from the chief, you'll know that how important collaboration is to him, and his belief that we need to continually improve and our collaboration efforts in the agency in order to help us get more work done. So I think that really sets a good stage for us to continue to work on what we've been doing over the last several years, decades, for some of you who've been involved in collaboratives for a long time. To me, you know, the ecosystems we manage and the society are both dynamic, and there will never be a time when we don't need to solve problems around natural resource management. And so, you know, that's kind of speaks volumes to me, that if we're going to continue to be in the situation where we need to solve problems around these types of issues, we've got to find a productive and effective way to do it. And I think collaboration is critical for us to be able to accomplish that. As stewards of public land, you know, our responsibility is to sustainably manage the resources that we've been put in charge of for the benefit of the public, to deliver the goods and services that people are interested in and expect to get from their public lands, Forest Service, BLM included, other federal land managers. And collaboration not only helps us understand what the public interests are, but helps us make better decisions and more informed decisions about that. You know, there was a time when the Forest Service was, you know, kind of went and did their thing, and, you know, people were good with that, and then we went through a pretty rough period where we learned a lot of things about what we were doing and how to improve and do things differently, and the public wanted to have a say in how decisions were being made and what kinds of activities were being undertaken. And given our multiple use mandate, that's a challenging thing to do, to try to balance the interests of all the different groups that benefit from national forests, whether it's for recreation, hunting, fishing, wildlife, whether it's providing a fiber supply to wood products industry, and a whole host, whether it's wildlife habitat for people's viewing pleasure or hunting. It's a whole variety of reasons, and it's part of the challenge and the complexity of trying to manage natural resources for the benefit of all of the public. You know, more importantly, I think what collaboration allows us to do is move beyond people's positions, and move to an interest-based approach to how we solve these problems. Once we create the space to develop an understanding about people's different interests, then it opens up a whole array of possibilities for solutions. When people are, you know, or organizations stay on their position, that's sort of like, well, this is my position and I'm just going to stay here and nobody's going to convince me of otherwise. And that's fine to have positions. But when it comes to trying to solve problems, if you can't understand people's interests behind those, where the space is created to help come up with productive solutions, that's really what collaboration does for us. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important to the agency to help us understand the public's interests from a variety of perspectives, and to help the public understand each other's interests that are very diverse across the landscape. And you know, I've seen really successful collaboration. One example to me, I don't know if you call it just a sort of a result, is when you get into a situation where you see a diverse group of people who start to advocate for each other's interests, even though it's not their own. You know that those folks have built a depth of understanding and a relationship and a respect for each other that allows people to act. Once people actually want to advocate for other people's interests in the group, that's an impressive, that's an impressive resume of collaboration to me. So I'll just, you know, summarize quickly. I don't want to take up too much time. I'd rather have time for questions and dialogue around this issue. So we're always going to need to solve natural resource problems. That's not going to change. And we need a productive way to do that. Collaboration helps us understand public interests and expectations so we can sustainably manage the land to deliver the goods and services people expect from those lands. And it brings about better solutions, more informed decisions, so that we can better manage the land in terms of what people expect. And we will always get more done together than we will separately. There is no doubt about that in my mind. The ability to leverage good ideas and innovation that comes out of groups working together always ends in a better outcome than somebody trying to do it by themselves. So, to me, it's just good governance. It's what the public should expect from their civil servants, whether it's federal or state or county, local government. The public should expect us to work together to develop good solutions to manage the resources that we're in charge of in a sustainable fashion for the future. So, with that, I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you, Christine. As you'll notice, we have a table for the panelists to come after their opening remarks to come for an open set of questions. And I know I have a couple, but I want to make sure I defer those to the rest of the group when we get to that question session. Our next speaker comes from the Bureau of Land Management, and I'm proud to introduce Joe Asher. He's the field manager for the BLM office here in Missoula. He spent 32 years working in public land management, and he's seen the power of collaborative processes across his experience. Back in the day, he worked here in Montana for the Forest Service before going to the BLM for the Flathead and Bitterroot National Forests. And then he moved into the BLM and was the recreation planner in the Dillon Field Office. His career's also taken him to Oregon and Washington, D.C., but we're glad to have Joe back here in Montana. He's been a member of our advisory council, and he's going to share the important perspective on working with the BLM. Joe Asher, thank you.
Morning, everyone. Very glad to be with you here. Similar to Christine, I'm kind of punting for our state director, John Raby, who was not willing to kind of brave the icy roads coming out of Billings yesterday, and he's got a kind of a big sage grouse meeting that he's preparing for. So, like a lot of our leaders are getting pulled 6 ways with a lot of different priorities. But just to kind of coin a few of the statements from John. In the annual report that's in your packet, just some words from John. I commend the Montana Forest Collaboration Network for fostering and encouraging a variety of partnerships involving appropriate utilization, conservation, and restoration of public and private lands. The work you're doing is a great example of stewardship in action. So, again, he regrets not being able to be here, but I've got some thoughts from the BLM perspective. Working together for a common shared vision and common goals is a great way to serve the public interest. As Christine mentioned, after all, we're public servants, and stewardship is kind of what we're all about for multiple use and sustained yield, and that's this is, kind of a great way to do that. As we all know, and it's sort of preaching to the choir, it takes a lot of time and investment of time and energy to bring stakeholders and diversity of interest to the table, to find common ground. But bottom line is participatory democracy is messy, and it does take time, and doesn't, it can just be messy sometimes. But the time and the effort is worth it in terms of the outcome on the ground. We've all seen it, we've all heard it, whether you're in the Elkhorns with Al, folks up in the Flathead with Paul and Amy. It is worth the time and effort to in terms of more acres treated, more water conserved, more wildlife habitat improved, et cetera. Working collaboratively is becoming more and more important. And in fact, as Gordy mentioned yesterday, it is the future of public lands management. And I couldn't agree more with that. Christine hinted a little bit about the way the Forest Service operated, back in 50 years ago. For those of us that were working, well, probably not too many of us, but back in the 60s, early 70s, as Christine mentioned, the way the public land management agencies operated is very different than the way we operate today. We pretty much, the administrative officer, people like myself in positions pretty much made the decisions and didn't involve the public much at all in what we were doing. That's certainly a different story now, and I think that the wave of the future, the way we're going to be doing business from this day forward is working with the collaboratives that we've nurtured. Working collaboratively is also a great way to leverage scarce resources to managing increasingly complex landscapes that require agencies and private landowners to blur those boundaries. You know, we're starting to, you know, see Chris in the back of the room there with TNC, you know, kick in some money to fund a forester for TNC to, you know, kind of do some work in lands that we may acquire in the Upper Blackfoot watershed, but just blurring those, you know, those boundaries, using public monies to do fuels reduction work on private land, you know, in the Upper Blackfoot watershed is some of the examples I could give. Also a great way to successfully manage T&E species like grizzly bears, bull trout, lynx, huge challenges. I really enjoyed Amy and Paul's time with us yesterday when they described, you know, how they were able to reach, you know, some great consensus regarding the habitat that has all of those T&E species up on the Flathead. What we heard from Patrick yesterday from the state gave a great summary of what our epic fire season was like this last year. Critical that we rely on the collaboratives to find you know, a narrative that really makes sense from a scientific standpoint, and one that we can all get behind in terms of you know, how we manage fire on the ground. We all know it's going to be a part of our lives forever, and to not get caught up in a lot of the false narratives that are kicking around out there. It's also, I think, an important way to foster mutual learning. We heard that yesterday several times from folks. The education of each other, figuring out, you know, where the other is coming from, is critical. So it's sort of the educating each other, I think, is a huge benefit for the collaboratives. The current examples of BLM involvement in collaborative groups. Al, you know, gave a great summary of BLM's involvement. A third of the land they manage in the Elkhorns is BLM. In the Missoula field office, we're heavily involved with the Blackfoot Challenge and all the work they're doing in the upper watershed. I mean, we're a small player. We have you know, skin in the game and are important in terms of you know, the resources we manage in that area. Just like to thank Tim and Gordy and Jim and others for reaching out to the BLM. I know the original restoration committee didn't have us involved, and I'm glad that the tent is now larger and does involve our agency and others. I think it was a wise move. My hope in the future is that, you know, you're looking at the collaboratives map that was up on the board yesterday, all kind of concentrated in western part of the state. MFCN is a statewide organization that now has forest and rangeland as part of its title, and I think our challenge in the future is to widen that to include and nurture, potentially nurture some collaboratives in eastern Montana, so that maybe 10 years from now we can have dots all over the map, you know, in those small towns that have a lot of BLM land. We have 8 million acres in this state that we manage, mostly in the eastern part of the state. So anyway, my thoughts, and looking forward to whatever questions we may have.
Thank you, Joe. Our final speaker is a county commissioner. We're glad to have Mark Peck with us from Lincoln County. He's a commissioner there up in Libby. And Mark, and for everybody who knows and cares about Libby, I was so sorry to see in the news the SK finger joint mill burning last night. I think Libby's forest history is remarkable in this state, and we hope to see it come back. But Mark is here to talk with us. He's seen a lot of change in his career. He's from Libby. He's had served with the DNRC there as a unit manager, overseeing the school trust lands. He's been part of fire suppression operations as a member of a National Incident Command team, a Type 1 and 2 teams. He's a member of our MFCN Advisory Committee, and he's also Vice Chair of the Forest County Coalition of the Montana Association of Counties. So Mark, thank you very much. And can we bring Mark forward to the serious podium? Thank you.
appreciate you acknowledging the fire incident. It's another hit that we'll find a silver lining in it somewhere, I'm sure. But, you know, when I look at, you know, why collaborate, you know, the collaboratives are important, I think we only need to look at the return to the absence of collaboration to find that answer. I'm a retired Air Force guy, and you know, multiple aircraft in a shared confined airspace with opposing goals, visions, and lack of communications is a pure definition of combat. And I think that's where we were a few years ago. It's really encouraging to see the number of people here. I had to laugh. I was having breakfast with my aunt and uncle. He's 84, but he told me that we were talking about Veterans Day coming up. And he said that his mom and dad were married on Veterans Day. And they used to say that Armistice Day or Veterans Day celebrated the end of World War I and the beginning of theirs. Thought that might be kind of apropos. You know, when we think about collaboration, what is collaboration? You know, the previous speakers have lined it out pretty good, but I'm sure most of you have heard of Stephen R. Covey, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think summarizes the effects and the importance of collaboration pretty well when he talks about the concept or the process of synergy. And he says the essence of synergy is to value differences, to respect them, to build on strengths, to compensate for weaknesses. Once people have experienced real synergy, they are never quite the same again. They know the possibility of having other such mind-expanding adventures in the future. When people begin to interact together genuinely, and they're open to each other's influence, they begin to gain new insight. The capability of inventing new approaches is increased exponentially because of differences. Synergy means you can literally produce something with another person that neither of you could have produced separately. And, you know, I just think, you know, as a county commissioner and the impact that the Kootenai Forest stakeholders has on our ability, you know, the power of a collaborative group aligned with county government, which I would say we're very closely aligned. In fact, we're in the process of mutual agreement signed between the county and a lot of different neat things that maybe we'll get a chance to talk to a little bit in here. But I can't stress enough how helpful it is. And it's not that we agree on everything. I don't want anybody to think it's all, you know, rah-rah, but those things that we do agree on, that we lock arms on, are extremely powerful. And we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. I think it's safe to, and the one thing we are steadfast in is what our goals are. Might have differing opinions on how to get there, things of that nature, but I can tell you from a local government standpoint, to have those things aligned, and as county commissioners, to have a diverse group that has snowmobile club, you know, timber industry, wilderness advocates. I mean, it's across the board. And to be able to sit down and have that collective feedback and that look at what Lincoln County is now versus what it was when I grew up, because that's who we represent is now. We represent now and we represent the future. Hopefully we can learn from the past. But with that, I will hush and I guess just scoot on over and have the seat. All right, and thank everybody for being here. I don't know how many folks are here, but it's a great crowd and look forward to chatting more.
Well, if I can ask Joe and Christine to come up to the table here, and we'll open up our question and answer. We've got, you know, roughly a half hour. We don't have to go that long if we want to take a little bit earlier break, but I'm sure we've got a lot of questions. I'm not sure if that mic is working. Christine, you want to check that?
Hello. Hello.
Oh, there we go. Try it. Yeah. Okay. I can walk around with this mic and offer some questions. You know, maybe I will start. You know, one of the things that I've always found in collaboratives to be exciting is the creative energy that comes out. You get these different points of view, like you talked about, Mark, and you come up with an idea and you think, this is great. And then there's a proposal from the collaborative, and it gets into the BLM or the Forest Service, and then there's this kind of, well, we don't have the capacity to implement that idea. It's hard for us to do something like that. We've got to get these specialists or something to make something happen. How can a collaborative strengthen the chain to make sure something can move forward? And I'll ask that to perhaps Joe and Christine first.
So I guess just a couple comments. I would say engaging early is critical, and understanding sideboards and that we have the space we have to operate in. So if you're not sure about that, I would encourage collaboratives to engage with your local Forest Service, whether it's the district or the Forest Supervisor's office, to understand what's the playing field look like, what kind of space do we have to create solutions, so you understand what sideboards are, and engage early, get involved early.
And the chain to make sure something can move forward. And I'll ask that to perhaps Joe and Christine first.
So I guess just a couple comments. I would say engaging early is critical, and understanding sideboards and that we have the space we have to operate in. So if you're not sure about that, I would encourage collaboratives to engage with your local Forest Service, whether it's the district or the Forest Supervisor's office, to understand what's the playing field look like, what kind of space do we have to create solutions, so you understand what sideboards are. And engage early, get involved early if there's something going on that you think you're going to be interested in a particular landscape or what have you. But I think that's going to be really helpful, because the worst thing to happen is have a collaborative come and work out a solution to something that's a really gnarly problem, and then come to the Forest Service and say, we got a solution to this problem, and not have understood, or Forest Service didn't communicate, or we all own a piece of that, right? Understanding what the rules and sideboards are. Having them come in and saying, well, we can't do that because we have this policy or this whatever. So it's really good to have that understanding up front. So I encourage you, if the Forest Service hasn't talked to you about those kinds of things, go in and be proactive and ask.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Jim, is and I think we heard it several times yesterday, is that there's a whole lot of things that can happen within the collaboratives that we as the agency folks either can't do or take a long time to get done. And so that I think just to echo Christine, just to get in early, understand what's going on, and then show up for the long haul, whether it's a particular project or issue, or I mean, some of the collaboratives and groups have been working in Montana for over 30 years, and it's just amazing to watch some of the same people that showed up at the table 30 years ago are still at the table. And I think that's, I think we heard it yesterday about that we're going to be here for the long haul, and it's a part of the way we're going to do business in the future.
Okay, this is our chance. Other questions? Dave?
So, overcoming adversity, obviously, people in the room here have chosen to engage in collaboration. There are people and groups that choose not to engage in collaboration, and that will lead to the panel after break, dealing with legal challenges and those kinds of things. I guess the question I would ask carrots and sticks, incentives, disincentives, are needed to reward collaboratives for all those people coming to the table, spending the time, and creating an incentive for coming to the table, and making it harder for people that refuse to come to the table and collaborate and invest in that time to monkey wrench things. So if you thought about that.
Trying to formulate, find a carrot and stick in all this. You know, I think for me, I guess the hope that I have is in all the legislation I see for the most part, forest reform is the focus primarily on collaborative groups and the collaboration process. I think and I'm going to speak for the Kootenai and Lincoln County, and at least from my perspective on it, I think what continues to motivate me to move through that is just the dedication of all the other people that are involved in that process and working together. You know, I mean, I look at the Common Ground group. How many years was it to come, did it take to get the veg management? 7 years. They have this great document that's been not only socially vetted throughout the county, but hired Mason, Bruce, and Gerard, validated it, fantastic document. I'm encouraging the other county commissioners for us to adopt that as our desired conditions in our county resource plan. So, I mean, it's those types of things working together and being able to, I mean, I will agree that the fruits of that labor aren't going to be seen. Well, I think they are being seen, but it's just, I mean, like you said, it's, sometimes you're at this stuff for 30 years. And I think to me that's the motivation, the carrot and stick, is the work that's being done, the relationships that are developed where we live. And hopefully they'll bear fruit, but I think they're already bearing fruit locally.
So this is a complicated one for us. Probably BLM too. We certainly support the right of citizens to challenge their government. That's a foundation in this country. And there are those who perhaps abuse some of the laws that we have in place. Or perhaps they're not, it's not meeting the original intent, if you're considering the Equal Access to Justice Act. Do I think that there are some, I mean, there's a lot of forest reform bills out there with a lot of ideas in them on how we address support those folks who have come together to solve problems versus the folks who refuse or are not interested in collaborating. I think we ought to try some things. There's some, will they work? I don't know. I don't think we'll know until we try some of the things that are being proposed. So we'll see what comes out if any kind of forest reform gets passed. I do think that the sort of incentives, I think, to Mark's point, is around seeing outcomes on the ground, building community, and what that means to the people that live in those places. The personal investment of time, and most folks are volunteers. It's because they care and they're passionate, they care about their community, they care about the land, and the people that they live and work with. And to me, that's a significant incentive to come to the table and help solve problems.
You know, this is you've hit on a topic that the advisory council has had a lot of lengthy discussions on, Dave, and that is, you know, kind of the alternative narrative that we all know is out there, that, you know, collaboratives don't work, they're a waste of time, they don't result in any tangible outcomes on the ground. And so I think the challenge for us is to, you know, to stand up those examples that are making a difference, whether it's the Elkhorns or the Kootenai or anywhere else, Flathead, where we can tell the story and get the word out in terms of what's going on and really have it be, like Christine says, tangible outcomes on the ground. In terms of the incentives, you know, the biggest incentive is just the satisfaction of a job well done and seeing actually something happen on the ground, you know, getting steps done that makes a difference, and then getting that story out. And I think that's the challenge for our organization and this whole organization is to do a better job of telling our story so that the incentive is not a lot that the agencies can do. But MFCN, again, you know, nonprofit, we can support buddy collaboratives like the ones that just got started in Sandwich County and really nurture those and make them be successful on the ground and have them see the same satisfaction that the other groups that have been in place for decades are seeing. The reason they're together is because it's the satisfaction they have working together and getting through something.
So one of the things that strikes me in listening to each of your individual presentations and in this dialogue, and Mark in particular, your extremely eloquent description of why this kind of gathering is important and how you have benefited from listening to and working with and learning from people who are very different than yourself, at least on paper. One of the things that strikes me looking back over quite a number of years I've been doing this work here is how different the tone of the conversation is in this room about these issues as opposed to what you see on television and the newspaper and Twitter and Facebook. And I speak as a person who has been called by people from my left. I've been likened unto a Nazi sympathizer for considering Mark Beck a friend and colleague, and people to my right. Even this morning, I think it was called environmental extremist, something like that. So it's just odd to me, and it creates this interesting dissonance in my head to be talking about these very same issues the way we are right now in this room versus the way I was, you know, at least listening in on Twitter at 6 o'clock this morning. I'm wondering whether you think it is a responsibility of this group, specific issues and bills and things aside, but to exert more of a moral leadership, as I think you did, Mark, in particular in your opening remarks. And again, not on any particular issue, but to demand that elected officials and other opinion leaders do better in terms of the tone and the respect and the civility. So question one for each of you is, do you believe that is a responsibility of a group like this? And if so, what might we do to help infect the broader politics with this tone, which I find to be quite remarkable and something that's easy to take for granted, I think, in this room. But if you walk out of this room and look at the way these issues are addressed anywhere else in the state or the country right now, like, it's really different. And I think that's part of the problem, but I'm not sure. So I'd just love to hear, you know, do you think that's part of the problem? If so, is it a responsibility of this group to try to do something about it? And if so, what might we do?
I think there's no question it's part of the problem. I think we all know, you know, all kind of preaching to the choir here as we gather once a year and you know, seeing the accolades of the benefits of the collaboration, but there is a different dynamic going on, you know, outside. And I think, again, I think that's the challenge for MFCN is to figure out, without wading into the kind of political arena and getting kind of caught in that whole, you know, swirl of things, but to still make a difference when we sit down with Christine's boss and my boss and really say, hey, you know, here's what we're doing, here's what the narrative is. You can get with our congressional representatives and really, you know, educate them about what's going on, so that when they, you know, are in front of the public or talking about things, they can understand what the issues, you know, educating them in a way that they can make a difference and change things. But That's tough when we've got the, you know, the forms of communication now where it's a 10-second bite and, you know, that's what you believe after you read it. So, you know, I don't know.
I would say it's the responsibility of the citizenry of the country, not just this group, to raise the level of expectation around how we interact with each other. Because at the end of the day, you know, we're all living on this planet. And it's going to be much better if we can be productive about how we go about life than kind of what we see in the media. It's frustrating to know that this is, to me, that, you know, my experience here in the northern region and the number and wide variety of partners that I've been able to work with in Forest Services, I mean, they're really, really good people. And they want to do the right thing, and people have found a way to sit down and try to figure that out. And I try not to look what's going on in the media, and, you know, Twitter and all those kinds of things, but that just seems like an alternate reality, and perhaps a lazy one, where people don't want to, it's easier to throw stones and not put a face to a name than it is to sit down with somebody who might have a different viewpoint than you and understand their interests and why they think what they might think, and actually build a relationship with somebody and have that lead to better outcomes.
First, I think that's the first time we've ever been accused of being eloquent. So take that back home and let it. You know, I'm just waiting to see the op-ed that, you know, ties the whole fire picture together. You know, on one hand, you read the op-ed that, you know, if we just logged everything, we wouldn't have any fire. Well, we all know that's BS. But on the other hand, you read, well, see, management doesn't work. It burned anyway. Well, you know, those are both false premises. And I'm just waiting for the op-ed that talks about the fact that, you know, it's pretty simple. You have weather, terrain, and fuels. The one thing that we have influence over is fuels, and it won't stop fire. I'll tell you what it does do, I mean, from experience and some intuitive common sense, is that it does return fire as a tool instead of a weapon. And so, yeah, I mean, it is our moral obligation, not just as these groups, but as individuals, to, when we read that crap, and it's flying from both sides, to land in the common sense middle. I mean, it's just, you know, if I'm on a tangent here, but I mean, the whole management versus wilderness argument just drives me nuts. Like the two are mutually exclusive to one another. You know, if we just manage the land for what it's suitable for, everything will work. I mean, we'll have logs in the yard, we'll have a wilderness area, we'll have, and that's why these collaborative groups are so important for the thing you're talking about right there, Scott, is that this is the common sense middle, and it's growing. So I think that's the thing that we need to, but this past fire season, we can all sit and, you know, we've had fire seasons similar to it in the past, but I'm hoping it was an anomaly, that it was, the whole system was stressed. So, you know, we need to take a deep breath and get back to science, get back to common sense, and so, yeah, no, I think it is an issue.
We look forward to reading the op-ed when you write it.
Yeah. I gotta write one on the national Christmas tree first.
There's just one more thing, your Stephen Covey comment made me think of something about, related to your question specifically, was integrity in the moment of choice. You know, when you have you can choose how you decide to react, and it's really easy to just overreact instead of, you know, choosing the high road. And it just goes back to people's choices and how they want to engage.
Chris, you have a question?
Yes, so in many cultures, move over here so you can see me. The idea of collaboration begins and ends with relationship. You know that. You work in Africa, and you don't do anything. You don't accomplish anything of management or socially without relationship in most cultures. In the United States, we gather in a room. They could all be strangers. We introduce each other and sit down and think we go to work. You guys have addressed, and Christine especially, you said relationship is very important. Joe, you said that participatory democracy is messy. Absolutely. Dave, you asked a question about what about the people that don't come to the table? How do you create relationship or atmosphere relationship so that these diverse interests will come together, you know, as many as possible will come to the table and play fair? You know, what's your advice in creating relationship such that there's trust, such that there's moral civility? What's your advice about that?
Be that yourself. You know, I mean, if you want to be trusted, or if you want trust, you have to be trustworthy. And that's probably a little oversimplified, but I think it boils down to respect and decency. And, you know, we can be, I mean, hell, I disagree with things with my kids that, you know, there's certain places we just don't go, you know, and I love them. But we don't discuss those things. We focus on the things that we like about each other. And I think it's really that simple. It's about stepping back and overcoming our own bias and being open to, remember an uncle of mine told me, he said, if you can't carry on two competing thoughts in your mind and analyze them at the same time, you're an idiot. And so I think that's what we have to push people to do. And there's some people that will never get there, and we just have to love them and understand that.
You know, you got to make the time to get to know people. And that's, you know, it's where they say the world's run by people who show up. So you got to show up and take the time to get to know people and understand where they're coming from. Without that, it's really easy to just say, oh, I don't agree with that person. And, I think that's a hard thing to do when things are fast-paced and everybody's exceptionally busy and we're distracted with all kinds of 24-hour news cycles, and it's difficult to do. But I mean, you really just need to take the time out to get to know people and understand where they're coming from. Then you can get to the place where you can sit down and solve problems.
You know, the tough part for the agencies, and like I think I can speak for my counterparts in the Forest Service, is that very few of us were trained in, you know, sitting around a table and kind of, you know, finding common ground. We were specialists in silviculture, recreation, wildlife biology, you know, whatever. And we just, there's not a lot of us that are trained in the agencies in that. And I think that's the role I think the collaboratives can play. They have a lot more freedom. You know, when we get folks together either for a public meeting or whatever, we have to comply with the Federal Advisory Committee Act, which is, God, it's all, you know, Chip can probably attest to, a load of things that you can get in trouble pretty quick if you don't, you know, follow the guidelines on that one. So, you know, the relationship piece is critical, and the collaboratives have a lot more freedom and leeway to nurture those relationships than internal with the agencies do.
I appreciated your remarks, Mark, about how the Lincoln County Commission is exploring ways to see how it could help move forward and work with it. Could be stakeholders and collaborative work. And I've been in a position in the past of challenging Forest Service leadership when they didn't move forward with collaborative products. Tim will remember the agreement 17 years ago with Sealy Lake Snowmobile Club. Pretty unusual for a wilderness group and a snowmobile club to have an agreement. And, we had to push Forest Service leadership. And I think, yesterday's panel with Paul and Amy and Chip articulated very well that the agency's made great progress, and I think our understanding of those respective roles has moved a long ways. But I'd like to respectfully point out that many place-based collaboratives in Montana are doing great work, but don't yet enjoy the political support they need to move those products forward. And I think it would be good, and it's appropriate that we're going to focus on legal obstacles later today with this. But I think we should also think, perhaps next year, about, we need to gain an understanding about how can we get to a place where we do enjoy the political support to move those place-based collaboratives. And imagine what will happen. Because there's nothing as rewarding as actual progress, whether it's logs at the mill or wilderness in the net. But we need to move those products forward together. And I think we need to gain a better understanding of how we can, what are the political obstacles, that prevent us from enjoying the support of our entire congressional delegation. I think understanding that would be something that we should explore.
Thank you, John. I don't know if that was for the panel, but I see Robin and then Chip have a question.
I just want to take a moment and personally thank Mark for your taking leadership on helping move our common ground, common sense, collaborative efforts together and forward in Lincoln County. I can't tell you how much I personally appreciate that. We've been working hard for 20 years to get where we are now. And I specifically liked how you talked about we're representing the now and where we want to go in the future. Because I've been thinking a lot about, I still hear some old stories about how we used to be in Lincoln County. You're sort of bubbling up now. So again, thank you for that leadership. But I want to ask all the panel, so what does that future look like? And what is collaboration, how is that going to take us forward? And in particular, what I'm interested in is, I feel that our communities, certainly in Lincoln County, are finally finding that place in the middle, that common sense place to move forward in. And we still have a little bit of a disconnect about understanding how to move within the process of the U.S. Forest Service, honoring all the rules and regulations that the Forest Service has to abide by, which we support, and we want that to happen. So, I don't know if we can answer this question today, but are there ways that we can move more efficiently and more productively through that relationship to make sure our place-based, common sense, collaborative agreements are at least being equal at the table and being considered, at the project level?
So that's a good segue to just talk a little bit about some of the efforts going on in the agency. And I think Forest Service and BLM has probably mirrored some efforts around efficiency. There's a recent video of Chief Took speaking at an environmental analysis and decision-making meeting in Phoenix at the end of September, where he says specifically, we take too long and it costs too much money to do what we need to do. We need to be more customer service oriented and more responsive. And so there are some specific efforts underway, not just around being more efficient with NEPA, how we conduct NEPA, but more efficient on dealing with special use permit requests and those hosts of things. And I think one of the things that I've talked to Tim and Gordy about is using MFCN and the network of collaboratives as a way to engage all of you in making those changes. So one, you can help understand, I think it'll build some more understanding around sort of the processes, but it'll also allow you to give us some feedback and some input about how we can be more efficient and the things that you see as barriers as we move through this change around becoming more efficient with NEPA and more efficient with how we manage our program work. So we're going to meet in December, aren't we, Gordy and Tim? To talk about what that might look like in terms of how we engage this group in helping us make that change. So it's a lot, there's a lot of process for collaboratives to try to, even for the Forest Service folks, to understand all of our internal processes and law, regulation, policy. Sometimes it is conflicting. It makes it really sort of complex and convoluted to try to move through. So we want to simplify that and make it easier for both us to get work done and for the public and collaboratives to engage with us in getting that work done. And we want and need your help to do that. So we will be engaging you in that process.
Chip?
Well, I know we're going to talk about legal challenges next, but I want to talk a little bit about the aftermath of litigation. And I have a question particularly for you, Mark, the whole family practice. It seems like a carrot for collaboration is getting more of what you want, your interests met. That is a carrot question earlier. It's really why do you come to the collaborative tables? Because you think you can be better at the collaborative table than away from getting your interests met. Well, legal challenges tend to be a very positional win-lose sort of a thing. So you're sitting there with a collaborative and you've got a great one, at least one great one there. And you have people who have all these interests in that. And you have a court case, and you had one recently where some of the people sitting in that collaborative feel like that was a positional win, and some of the people feel like that was a positional loss. So my question is around what opportunity that presents for the collaborative, and particularly for the people who feel like they won in that case, to strengthen meeting the interests of the people who feel like they lost. So how do you turn that around so that people, so that you strengthen the valuing of collaborative processes through the recognition that the court may not be the best place to get your interests met?
Are you talking about the recommended wilderness? Okay. I wasn't sure if you're going to East Reservoir or.
I could have been more clear.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Well, that's a tough one. I don't know if we even had that discussion in the, wow. Boy, as an athlete, well, you win some and you lose some. You know, I guess, are you driving towards how do you maintain the relationships in the collaborative when those things happen? Yeah. Well, I'll go back to my best friend and I. We're both left-handed pitchers, very good pitchers. We spent all summer pitching against one another. And sometimes he'd win, sometimes I'd win. And then when we were on the All-Stars together, we won the state championship. I don't know if that's a good metaphor or not, but it boils down to the relationship and the trust, in my opinion. And if the relationship and the trust is there, it goes back, I think the comment I made about there's things that my kids and I just, okay, we're not going to go there. And I think I think as a collaborative, that's where we are. I'll throw the hand grenade out there. 10 Lakes Wilderness Management Areas is something we knew as a collaborative that we were not going to get. So let's just agree to, and let's work on those things that we can, but it boils down, I forget which one you talked about, the relationships and the trust. And I think those are there. It's taken years to develop them. And And it's about respect. You know, it's not, you know, if I lose and somebody else in the collaborative wins, and it's a court case, I mean, I'm pissed at the judge. Okay, I'm not upset with the people that won, I guess. So I don't know if that helps. Probably not, but I think it just boils down to the relationships and just it's being able to accept that ruling, you know, and how do we move forward productively on other things, or it's not that we don't talk about it or discuss it, or I don't know if that helps. That's an excellent question.
Can I'll just add to that, because Mark, you might not know this, nobody left our collaborative because of that. The folks who brought that lawsuit, they took their issue to the courts and used the system as it should be, and they're still with us.
Yeah, and I'll just add that throughout the process, as an NWA person, we intervened in support of the Forest Service in that lawsuit, and I've made a concerted effort to be transparent with our partners throughout that process for what Mark's talking about here, to say, hey, this is happening, this is why, this is the recent update as the past 2 years unfold, so that there's no surprises amongst the partners, and I think that's been a really important approach.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to point out that we had a lot of success on the ground with the snowmobile interests in our collaborative, and so even though we had a lot of kind of roundabout conversations about that particular issue that we never resolved, and we were like, this doesn't have, we can't have this discussion in our collaborative because we can't agree. But what we could agree on was supporting, protecting, some areas that conservation community wanted to see protected, and then supporting snowmobile access in areas that group wanted snowmobile access. And so we were very successful with those partners in making site-specific, on-the-ground agreements, which I think is really the point more than the ideological.
You know what? We have time for 2 more questions and then a closing comment. But you do have little note cards, those little index cards. And if you have a question, please fill that out, and then I'll collect them, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the session here. So first this question here, and then over here, and then one final comment. Yes.
My question is for Mark, I guess, basically. It's about the school trust land. In Mineral County, we're over 80% in federal hands, and that creates an issue for the tax situation. Our schools, my school in particular, St. Regis, for over 500,000 acres of national forest, we only received a little over $900 from Forest Reserve funds to run our school. That doesn't buy even one laptop for one kid. So my question is, how do we support our kids and our schools with non-commercial management, and would having more state, I guess, what's the term for the land that the state uses, school trust land?
School trust.
Would that help us in an area like that where we're basically strangling?
Well, I think the thing with the school trust land is that goes into the general school fund. So even if you had, an extra 20,000 school trust acres, that's going to get split across every school district in the state of Montana. So it would help some, but I don't think you're going to see the direct effect that you would have with increased commercial production on the forest, because that comes directly back to the county. And am I correct on that? Where's Sonia at? Did she step out?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, am I good? Okay. Yeah, you know, and the other part of it is, on the school trust lands is, they don't pay PILT, they don't pay, you know, so it would help, but it wouldn't be anywhere near the shot that if there was increased productivity on the forest that comes directly to the county and the schools.
Okay, we have one more comment, and then we're going to close our session. Brian?
I just want to pick up on a couple of things that have been said here that I find highly interesting. One of the panelists pointed out how inspiring collaborative process is for the participants. And I think everybody in the room is testimony to that, in contrast with the polarized rhetoric that we've seen for decades and is getting worse. The question in my mind as I've been sitting here for the last day and a half is, what can we do to expand the circle of people who experience the collaborative process? Not just by informing more collaborators. And my son would say I'm not just technologically incompetent, I'm technologically hopeless. But Facebook is a reality. And it occurred to me yesterday that every collaborative in this room has the potential, either through your own children or through your local school, to do something like the Pelham National Forest does in the Summer Youth Monitoring Program. They have kids who work in what's called experiential learning. They get out of the classroom, they do inventories for the Forest Service. And I've attended their award ceremony, and I can assure you that they and their parents are fired up every year. Those kids are engaged in something. And my thought would be that every collaborative in this room has the possibility of talking to their local high school and seeing if they have any kids who would like to come to your meetings for academic credit and start a Facebook page about your own collaborative. That has the potential to expand the circle. They would come to every meeting, to expand the circle in the community that know what you are doing. And I think has the potential to share the message that there's an alternative to shouting at each other and throwing arrows. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Panelists, do you have any closing comments before we finish?
I would just, on behalf of all three of us, thank everybody for the opportunity to be here and speak with you all and have a conversation around this.
Echo that sentiment, and just glad to be part of the organization. I think as we move forward and get together once a year, I think I'm heartened in seeing where this organization may head in the next 10 years, and Brian just mentioned expanding the circle and seeing where it all goes. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for being here. And I think we need to understand that it's not just this process that is messy with government. I know we've got some other current county commissioners and prior county commissioners, and just about everything we do is extremely controversial. I mean, it's the only sport I know of that 51% is a win. That means 49% of the population is pissed off at you, so at any given time. But stay the course. That's all I say. We've got to hang in there. The inertia's there. I think we're getting to a tipping point. I look at Al Christopherson. My first exposure to the collaborative process was the Elkhorn Mountain Working Group in, 03, 04, 05, somewhere back in there. And I can tell you that wasn't all hugs and kisses, was it? But got some tremendous things done there. So the process is working. You know, the congressional delegations, every one of them, I see Eric in here somewhere, I see Spencer back there. I don't know if Eric's here, but they're all very, very tuned in to the collaborative process, very supportive of it. So we need to stay the course. And I love your idea about involving high school kids. I'm not sure who that was over there that came up with, and just really as a community, commissioners that are sitting out here, if you're not involved in the process, get involved in it. if your commissioners aren't, reach out to them. I'm telling you, that's a powerful relationship, and nothing will align a community quicker than having those types of relationships developed on a local level. So thanks for being here and keep up the good work.
And let's thank our panelists, everyone.